bonus excerpt was taken from the Full and Bloom interview with Beau Hill. In this segment, Beau talks about how producer-engineer Keith Olsen gave him his start. With Keith Olsen, he kind of helped you get started, correct?
Very much so, yeah. He came out and we did that demo, and he was still engineering at Sound City. And ultimately, the business partners that we were involved with, that didn't work out. And but I stayed in touch with Keith, and he invited me out a couple of times to fly out from Dallas to just go and hang around at Sound City. And so we just stayed in touch. And then when I was in Colorado, I worked myself up from janitor to the head engineer at a little studio in Golden called Applewood. And one of the things that I was able to do is at that time they ran Applewood just like a 9-to-5 business. And so I kept sitting around going, well, man, what happens between, after 6 o'clock until 6 o'clock in the morning? Nothing. So I got the owner of the studio to allow me to go in and just learn my craft basically after hours. And so I went in and took my band and and we would experiment. We made some of the world's most god awful sounding recordings you could possibly imagine. But over the course, I've just figured out by dumb luck, okay, this is the way to do this is the way to do that, and blah blah blah. So at the end of it, we wound up with a collection of songs, and I sent them to Keith. I just sent it. Just said, hey, check it out. Tell me what you think. And Keith really liked it. He said, wow, this is great. And at that time, Keith had now, exploded into a monster producer, and he was being managed by Irving Azoff. So he played it for Irving, and Irving said, get this kid out here, we'll have him a deal. And so I flew out again, and Irving arranged the meetings, and Keith went with me to the meetings, and I had 6 offers in one day. It's considering the shambles that the industry is in right now, it's pretty amazing. I mean, people probably think I'm telling a fishing story, but it's really true. We had 6 offers in one day. Obviously we followed Keith's and Irving's suggestion, and they said, okay, we think the deal with Columbia is going to be the best for you. So I said, okay. And that was it.
What year is this?
This would have been, I think we got signed in 77 or 78.
Okay.
And that was a band called Airborne, and that record came out in 79.
Okay. I'm probably wrong on this, but there was an Airborne that Don Dokken was in for a while, but this is a different Airborne, right? It didn't feature Don Dokken, correct?
Oh, no.
Okay. Just checking.
And actually, Airborne wasn't a band when we got signed. Airborne was just a collection of my friends that wanted to come in the studio and that would play for free. And then we wound up, 3 of those, or myself and 2 of those guys, remained in Airborne, and then Keith hired John Pierce on bass and Mike Baird on drums.
Oh, okay. And so you record that record and release it?
We record the record, we release it, and within 48 hours of the record getting released, our rabbi at Columbia, who was Don Ellis was his name, man, I can't remember, I even remembered that. He wrote us a letter and announced that he was leaving Columbia and he was going to be president of RCA in the UK. So as with most things in the record business, when you lose your rabbi, you kind of lose everything. So the record came and went, and largely unnoticed. And I was back in Colorado with a couple of the guys from the original band, doing demos for Airborne 2.
And so from there, it's just you basically recording the Airborne demos that you learned how to record?
It was myself and the guitar player, David Zychek.
Okay.
And we brought in 2 more guys, Rick Allen and Gary Pavlika. And then we spent, almost a year, if memory serves, trying to get those demos done. And we we got a lot of them done, but then the band kind of started to fall apart because people were getting understandably broke and poor, and things didn't look like they were going to be going too well. So that project kind of got put on the shelf until 2003, believe it or not. David and I got together and we worked for a while and put together a 15-song collection of stuff that had never been released. And we got it released on Rewind Records. I mean, we just did it for us. We weren't doing it to try to accomplish anything. And I mean, there was no band or anything. We just were goofing around and decided to put it out. And that was the Airborne story.
Okay. And what did you do in the band?
I played keyboards, guitar, and I was one of the 3 lead singers.
I'm assuming there's some clips on YouTube?
I haven't. You could probably find some. I know you could find a couple of Airborne 1 on YouTube.
Okay.
I don't know about the second record we called The Dig because we thought it was like an archaeological dig, digging through all those old recordings. But this predated videos and things of that nature. So it's just the YouTube that I saw was just basically a static shot of the album cover and then the song played in the background.
Is there a song in particular that you thought was one of the better songs?
Well, one of the artists that I've been working with recently from Norway, believe it or not, sent me a link to YouTube about 3 days ago, funnily enough. And it was a song called "No Exception to the Rule," and it was noteworthy because it was I wrote the song with David Zychak, and while we were in the studio, I was talking to Keith about trying to do some orchestration, and he had just come back from the UK. I think he had done some orchestration for, believe it or not, I think it was the Grateful Dead. I could be totally wrong with that, but he had struck up a relationship with Paul Buckmaster, who was the genius behind all of the Elton John orchestrations and hit arrangements that he had. And so he called Paul Buckmaster and asked if we could come over and he and I could sit down and write the score. And so he had relationships with a bunch of guys from the London Philharmonic. And so we had a 30-piece orchestra come in and play the orchestration. So that makes that song kind of special, and it's set aside from the other stuff on the record because of the orchestration. It was my first session in London. It was a bunch of firsts for me.
And how was it working with Keith Olsen on that record? Is there any kind of memory that stands out from that studio experience?
Well, Keith, for all intents and purposes, was my mentor from day one. He kind of, I won't say he guided me, but I guess I kind of guided myself in his footsteps wherever I could, because he was very gracious and letting me hang out at the studio and basically just do nothing but ask dumb questions and why do you do this and how does that happen and what about this. And so Keith was probably the most instrumental and the most influential person in my career.
Did you sit in on some sessions at Sound City at that time?
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming you were around the Fleetwood Mac era with him, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I can tell you one very funny story, and it's a true story. I don't know how familiar you are with the Fleetwood Mac background and all that, but way back in the day when I was still in high school, I was sleeping on Keith's couch because I was there for one of my visitations, and then somebody came in and said, hey, you're gonna have to go in the other room because I've got to clean up around here, and that was Stevie. So Stevie would come down and clean Keith's house and kind of be the maid in exchange for Keith taking them into the studio. So Stevie and Lindsay both would come down and do various odd jobs and things like that. And Keith, in turn, would put them in the studio, and they started cutting Buckingham Nicks.
Sure.
And the drummer in Buckingham Nicks was my drummer when we went to L.A. We brought him out from L.A. His name was Gary, quote, Hoppy Hodges. And so he actually joined Buckingham Nicks when I decided I was going to go to college in Colorado. So he stayed on in L.A. and I came back to Colorado. When I left Colorado, I moved to the Bahamas for a little while, and I worked as a dive master. Then, again, Keith Olsen tracked me down in the Bahamas, and he said, hey, I just got a call from Bud Prager, and Foreigner is looking for a keyboard player, guitar player, background singer. Would you be interested in auditioning? And I was starving in the Bahamas, and I went, hell yeah. So I got on a plane, went to New York, had a meeting with Bud, and obviously I didn't get the job, but I didn't even audition because they had already kind of made their decision while I was in transit on the way up there. And so I was in New York until 1988, and then I moved to L.A. Or pardon me, in 86 and 87, I lived in London. I kept my place in New York, but I lived in London because I was doing a lot of work over there then. Then when I left London, came back to New York exclusively for about maybe another year, and then I moved out to L.A.
And then from L.A., are you starting right away with recording bands?
Oh, yeah. I was in L.A., to do the Ratt records. I was out in L.A. at least 3 months a year.
Oh, gotcha.
While I was living in New York and in London. So, it was a logical transition for me.
Don't anymore. Won't be my pretty boy.